My father refused to claim me as his son. 20 years later, he came begging me to save his life. Growing up, my last name was more like a scar than a badge of honor. A cruel little joke whispered behind my back at school or mumbled under my breath when teachers stumbled over my records, because the truth was, in our town everyone knew who my father was. Rick Dalton, the golden boy who'd married the prom queen and built a life that was as shiny and fake as a movie set. But what they didn't know, what they didn't see, was that for the first 16 years of my life, Rick Dalton did everything in his power to pretend I didn't exist. He didn't deny the biology. Hell, it was pretty obvious. Just one look at my face, and anyone could see the resemblance. Same dark hair, same stubborn jaw. But he denied the responsibility, denied the title, denied me a seat at the table, where he played proud husband and father to his new family, like I was just some piece of trash blown in from the gutter. My mom, Laura, she was 17 when she had me. Scared and stupid in that way only teenage girls can be when they believe every sweet lie from a boy who smells like cigarettes and stolen cologne. And when she told Rick she was pregnant, he laughed in her face, said it wasn't his, said she was crazy, said she was trying to trap him, even though we both knew the truth, even though he was the only boy she'd ever been with, even though every timeline added up so perfectly it hurt. He told her to take care of it. Cold, casual, like we were talking about trash day. But she didn't. She kept me. And for that, I guess, he hated her. And by extension, he hated me. Growing up, I lived on the wrong side of town. The side where the lawns were dead and the cars sat on cinder blocks, and dinner was whatever you could microwave from the clearance freezer aisle, while he lived in a big 2-story house with a wraparound porch and new SUVs in the driveway and Christmas lights that stayed on from Thanksgiving through January. Sometimes we'd see him at the grocery store or at the 4th of July parade, and Mom would grab my hand so tight it hurt, dragging me away before I could even look at him. And sometimes, if I was fast enough, I'd catch his eyes locking onto mine, cold and empty and dismissive, like he was staring at a stain he couldn't scrub out of his life. I used to think, maybe, just maybe, someday he'd change his mind. Someday he'd show up at our door with a sheepish smile and a baseball glove, ready to be the dad he was supposed to be. But he didn't. Instead, he married a woman named Karen, and they had 2 perfect blonde-haired, blue-eyed daughters who wore matching dresses and smiled in family photos like they actually liked each other. And meanwhile, my mom worked 2 jobs and came home with blisters on her hands and tears in her eyes and told me we didn't need him anyway. Maybe we didn't, but I did. And that hollow, aching hunger for him, for his approval, for his acknowledgement, it gnawed at my ribs for years, silent and rotting. By the time I was 16, I knew better. Knew he wasn't coming. Knew he didn't care. Knew I wasn't his son. Not really, not where it counted. And yet, some dumb part of me still clung to hope. So when I got arrested, stupid teenage shit, shoplifting a 6-pack from the gas station because I wanted to impress a girl who didn't even remember my name the next day. And they called my mom. And she couldn't come because she was stuck at work. I did the one thing I swore I'd never do. I called him. The cop handed me the phone, and I dialed the number I had memorized since I was 10, fingers trembling so bad I almost dropped the receiver. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then he answered. Hello. His voice was deeper than I remembered, rougher. Dad, I said, the word tasting like rust in my mouth. It's me. It's Nate. Silence. Long and heavy. I need help, I said, voice cracking. Please. More silence. And then, I don't have a son. Click. The line went dead. I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand, while the cop gave me a look like he'd seen this kind of thing too many times to be surprised. I slept in a cell that night, on a cot that smelled like piss and defeat, and when Mom finally scraped together enough to bail me out the next morning, I didn't tell her what happened. Didn't tell anyone. But something in me broke that night. Clean final. Like a bone snapping under too much weight. And from that day on, I stopped calling him Dad in my head. He was just Rick Dalton now. Another man who chose to forget me. Another man I swore would regret it one day. Fast forward 20 years. I was 36. Running my own construction company. Working 15-hour days. Building a life brick by goddamn brick. Because nobody ever handed me shit. I had a house, not fancy, but mine. A wife who loved me even when I was too tired to love myself. 2 kids who called me dad, without fear, without hesitation, without even realizing what a miracle that was. And Rick Dalton? I hadn't thought about him in years. Until one morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. Almost let it go to voicemail. But something, some ancient, ugly instinct, made me swipe answer. Hello. There was a long pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in 2 decades. Nate, he rasped. It's Rick. Silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. I said nothing. I need to see you, he said, voice breaking. Please. It's important. It's life or death. And just like that, the years folded in on themselves. The cot, the cold, the phone going dead in my hand. I should have hung up, should have laughed in his face. But instead, I said 5 words I never thought I'd say again. Where are you? Because sometimes, the universe brings people back into your life. Not for reconciliation, not for healing, but for reckoning. And this was long overdue. I didn't drive there with anger burning in my gut like I expected. Didn't storm down the highway replaying old scenes of betrayal on a loop. Didn't plan out speeches or imagine how it would feel to slam a door in his face like he'd done to me. No, what I felt was colder, heavier, something closer to indifference than hate, something that tasted metallic and final, like blood or iron or the first snow of winter when you know damn well nothing green is surviving the season. He told me to meet him at a diner, one of those sad little places at the edge of town, where the vinyl booths are torn and the smell of burnt coffee clings to your skin even after you leave. And when I pushed open the glass door and stepped inside, it was like walking straight into a ghost story where the past had rotted but refused to stay buried. He was sitting in the back corner, hunched over a cup of coffee like it was the only thing holding him together, and for a long moment, I didn't even recognize him. Rick Dalton, the man who once wore tailored suits and drove shiny trucks and smirked like he owned the whole goddamn world, now looked like a scarecrow someone had forgotten to take down after Halloween. His hair was gone, just a few pathetic wisps clinging to his spotted scalp, and his skin sagged from his bones like wet paper, yellowed and cracked. And when he looked up at me, his eyes were sunk deep into his skull, hollow and desperate and begging. He tried to stand, but his legs shook too much, so he stayed seated, waving me over like I was some long-lost friend. I didn't move, just stood there, staring at him across the cracked linoleum floor, until he cleared his throat and croaked out, Nate, thank you for coming. Hearing my name in his mouth made my skin crawl. I walked over slowly, pulled out the chair across from him, but didn't sit, didn't say a damn word. Let him stew in the silence. He shifted, his hand trembling as he tried to lift the coffee cup. And that's when I noticed the hospital band still clinging to his wrist, the way his fingernails were tinged yellow at the edges, the way every breath seemed to cost him more than he could afford. He was sick. Terminal, probably. Part of me wanted to smile, wanted to savor it, but I didn't, because this wasn't joy. This wasn't triumph. It was just cold, like looking at the body of a man who died a long time ago but was too stubborn to lie down. Finally, he spoke. I'm sick, Nate. Real sick. Liver failure. I need a transplant. Without it. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have to. I leaned back against the booth, arms crossed. Still silent. Still watching. They said family is the best match, he said, voice cracking, desperation leaking out like pus from a wound. You're my son, my only chance. I let those words hang between us for a long, painful minute. Son. Now, after all these years, after all the silence, after all the ways he made sure I knew I wasn't wanted, now I was his son? Because he needed a piece of me to keep his rotting body stumbling forward another year or two. I finally leaned in, close enough that he could see the truth in my eyes. You don't have a son, I said, my voice low and calm and deadly. Remember? You made that real clear 20 years ago. He flinched like I'd slapped him. Good. He tried again. I was wrong, Nate. I was young, scared. I didn't know how to be a father. But you could save my life. I laughed. Not loud. Not angry. Just hollow. You know what's funny? I said, tapping the table with one finger. You could have saved mine. One call. One visit. One moment when I needed you. But you didn't. You left me to rot. You left a scared 16-year-old kid, sitting in a goddamn holding cell thinking he didn't matter enough to anyone to be worth a phone call. He shook his head, tears starting to build in his sunken eyes. I'm sorry. God, Nate, I'm sorry. I stood up, pushed the chair back under the table, looked down at the man who made me, and then abandoned me. Sorry doesn't buy a liver, I said. I turned to leave. He grabbed my wrist, weak, shaking. Please, he gasped. Please, Nate. I'm begging you. I'm your father. I ripped my arm away like his touch burned. No, I said, loud enough that a couple of tired waitresses glanced over. You're just a man who helped make me. That's not the same thing. And then I walked out. Didn't look back. Didn't hesitate. Left him there, small, broken, dying, in the shitty little diner where all good things went to die. That night, after putting my kids to bed, after making sure the house was locked up tight, I sat alone in the living room, staring at nothing. I should have felt triumphant. Should have felt like justice had finally been served on a silver fucking platter. Instead, I just felt empty. Not sad. Not guilty. Just tired. Because the truth is, some wounds don't bleed out loud. Some wounds just stay there, hidden under the skin, poisoning everything until one day you realize you survived, not because you were stronger, but because you learned how to live with the venom inside you. And maybe that's what survival really is. Not healing. Not forgetting. Just learning how to walk without letting the limp slow you down. Rick Dalton died 3 months later. I found out through a Facebook post one of his daughters made. A long, flowery message about what a wonderful father he was. What a brave man. How much he loved his family. I didn't comment. Didn't like it. Just kept scrolling. Later that night, my wife found me standing in the kitchen, staring out the window into the dark. You okay? She asked. I nodded. Because I was. Really, truly, finally I was. Because Rick Dalton didn't get to define me. Not anymore. Maybe he never did. I wasn't the son he wanted, but I was the man he could never be. And that was enough. I didn't drive to that hospital because I wanted to see him. Didn't show up because some deep, hidden part of me still ached for his approval. Didn't even go out of anger or curiosity. I went because something inside me needed to witness it. Needed to see with my own 2 eyes the man who threw me away, now reduced to nothing more than skin and tubes and desperate pleas for mercy. Because maybe, just maybe, I needed the proof that karma was real and that life had a way of closing its own circles, whether you stood in the middle of them or not. The hospital smelled like bleach and broken promises. I hated it instantly. I hated the way the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Too bright and too cold. I hated the way the nurses glanced at me with pity because they knew what I was walking into. I hated the way my own heart thudded too hard against my ribs, like my body couldn't decide if I was furious or terrified. When I got to the room, the door was half open. I didn't knock. I didn't have to. He was lying there, shriveled and small, like a balloon someone had let the air out of, and for dripping something slow and steady into the back of his hand, a heart monitor beeping out the sluggish, irregular rhythm of a man already halfway gone. His skin was yellow, sickly, stretched too tight over bones that no longer looked like they belonged to someone alive. His hair, what little was left, was thin and colorless. His lips were cracked, his eyes hollow. And yet, when he saw me, they lit up, like I was some kind of miracle, some kind of hope. Nate, he rasped, his voice dry and broken. You came. I stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind me. Didn't answer. Didn't smile. Just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for him to humiliate himself properly. He struggled to sit up, grimacing against the pain, and when he finally managed it, he looked at me like a man who had already drowned but was still begging for one more breath. I'm dying, he said, like I didn't already know, like I hadn't already read it all over his hollowed-out body the second I walked in. I said nothing. Let the silence fill the room until it felt like another patient gasping for air between us. They say family is the best match, he said, coughing wetly into a tissue that came away spotted with blood. "You're my son, Nate. You could save me." The word son hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. Didn't let him see it. Instead, I let out a slow, humorless laugh, shaking my head. "Funny," I said. "You didn't have a son 20 years ago." He closed his eyes like my words physically hurt him. "Good. Let it hurt. Let it burn." "I was wrong," he whispered. "I was young. Stupid. Scared." I took a step closer. Close enough to see the way his hands trembled against the bedsheets. Close enough to smell the antiseptic clinging to his skin like a second, dying layer. "You weren't scared," I said, voice low and steady. "You were selfish." He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "You weren't some scared kid, Rick. You were a grown-ass man who knew exactly what he was doing when he slammed that door in my face. You made a choice. Over and over and over. And now so will I." He reached out, his hand skeletal, grasping for mine like he thought he still had the right. I stepped back, let him grab nothing but air. "Please, Nate," he croaked. "Please. I don't have anyone else." There it was. The truth laid bare. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about regret. It was about desperation. I was a body, a spare part, a fucking resource he thought he could mine now that the rest of his life had crumbled to dust. I looked him dead in the eye, and I smiled. Not my problem anymore. I turned and walked out of that room. Didn't glance back. Didn't slow down. Didn't give a single flying fuck what happened after I closed that door. Because he wasn't my family. He never had been. Family doesn't throw you away like garbage. Family doesn't pretend you don't exist when you're drowning. Family doesn't call only when they need saving. No. Family is the people who show up even when it's hard. Family is the people who stay even when it's ugly. Family is the people who don't need a transplant before they remember you exist. Rick Dalton could rot in that bed. He earned it. Every wheezing breath. Every second of pain. Every regret clawing at the edges of his dying mind. He built that bed. Now he could fucking lie in it. Alone. Just like he left me all those years ago. Later that night, after I tucked my kids into bed and kissed my wife goodnight, I sat alone on the porch. The night air crisp against my skin. The stars scattered overhead like broken glass across a black canvas. And for the first time in my life, I felt clean. Not happy. Not whole. But clean. Like I had finally scraped the last pieces of him out of my blood. Like I had finally stopped bleeding for someone who wouldn't have pissed on me if I was on fire. And maybe that's all the closure we ever really get. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Just the power to walk away and never look back. And as the night stretched out before me, wide and silent and full of promise, I realized something. I wasn't his son. Not anymore. I was my own man. And that was more than he ever deserved. The hospital looked like every bad memory I had ever tried to bury. All white walls and sharp chemical smells and exhausted nurses pushing carts full of dying hope. And if I hadn't been so numb, so hollowed out by everything that had already happened between me and the man waiting upstairs, I probably would have turned around right there and walked out without saying a word. But something ugly and electric kept me moving, like I needed to see it, needed to stand over the wreckage of what he used to be and make sure it was real. The receptionist barely glanced up when I told her the name. "Room 512, she said, handing me a visitor's pass like it was a death sentence. Maybe it was. The walk-up felt longer than it should have, my boots heavy against the polished floor, my breath too loud in the sterile, humming silence of the hallway. When I reached the room, the door was open just a crack. I pushed it wider with one finger. There he was. Rick Dalton, the man who spent his whole life pretending I didn't exist, now strapped to machines, his body withered and yellowed and fragile, looking about as close to death as a man could without being zipped into a body bag. For a second, just a second, I almost didn't recognize him. The man I remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, arrogant, was gone. This was something else. Something pitiful. Something small. He turned his head when he heard the door creak open. His eyes, hollow and desperate, found mine. And for a moment, neither of us said anything. Just stared. He tried to sit up straighter, but the tubes tugged at his arms and chest, and he winced like even breathing was a full-body effort. "Nate," he rasped, voice so thin I barely caught it. "You came." I didn't answer, didn't move, just stood there, arms crossed, heart slamming against my ribs with a cold, mechanical rhythm. He smiled, or tried to, and it cracked his dry lips. I need to talk to you." I stepped inside, let the door swing shut behind me with a soft thud. Still said nothing, still watching, still waiting for him to humiliate himself the way I needed him to. "I'm dying," he said, like it was news. I raised an eyebrow. "Nothing more." "I need a liver transplant," he went on, coughing into a tissue that came away spotted with blood. "Family's the best match. You're my son." The word hung there, rotten and putrid in the air between us. Son. Like he hadn't thrown me out of his life the second he found it inconvenient. Like he hadn't spent 20 goddamn years pretending I was a stranger on the street. I took 2 slow steps forward, letting my boots ring out against the tile like gunshots. Stopped at the foot of the bed. Let him see exactly what he had created. "You need something," I said, voice calm, almost bored. "And you thought, hey, maybe the trash I left on the curb 2 decades ago will be generous enough to come save me." He flinched. "Good. I was scared," he whispered. "I made mistakes." I laughed, sharp and joyless. "You didn't make mistakes," I said. "You made choices." He shook his head, eyes wide and glassy. "I was a kid," he said. "I didn't know how to be a father. But I'm trying now. I'm reaching out. Doesn't that count for something?" I leaned down, getting close enough to smell the sour, metallic stink of sickness leaking from his pores. "You reached out when your clock started ticking down and nobody else wanted to touch you," I said, each word slow and deliberate, each syllable a nail in the coffin. "You didn't come looking for your son. You came looking for a spare part." Tears welled up in his eyes. Pathetic. He tried to grab my hand, but I stepped back, letting his fingers clutch at empty air. "Please, Nate," he gasped. "Please. I don't want to die." I stared at him, at the man who had looked through me my entire life, at the man who denied me, erased me, discarded me. And I realized something. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't feel anything at all. He was already dead to me. Had been for 20 years. And you can't mourn a corpse twice. I shook my head slowly. "Find someone else," I said. His mouth opened and closed, desperate. "You're my son." He choked. I turned to leave. Hand on the doorknob. Paused just long enough to drive the final dagger in. "No," I said without looking back. "I'm not." And then I walked out. Left him coughing and sobbing and clawing at the empty space I used to occupy. Left him to die the way he lived, alone, forgotten, unloved. And you know what? I didn't feel a single ounce of guilt, because some debts can never be paid, and some betrayals deserve no mercy. I didn't go to his funeral, didn't send flowers, didn't even read the obituary all the way through when someone slid it across my desk like it was supposed to mean something. Rick Dalton, beloved husband, father, friend. Funny how easy it is to lie in print, how easy it is to bury the truth 6 feet under with a body. But I knew better. I knew exactly who he was, and who I was. And I knew that no obituary, no black suits, no crocodile tears could change the fact that when he needed saving, the son he threw away stood tall, looked him dead in the eye, and walked away without a second thought. That was my closure. Not revenge, not forgiveness, just the end, the clean, sharp end. And as I stood in my backyard that night, the stars wheeling overhead, my wife laughing with our kids inside, life pulsing strong and vibrant all around me, I realized something so clear it nearly knocked me off my feet. I wasn't his son. I was my own man, built from blood and grit and all the broken pieces he left behind. And that was more than he ever deserved. You'd think there'd be some dramatic final moment when the past just lets go. Some clean cut, some bolt of lightning that severs the old scars from your skin and leaves you shiny and new. That's not how it happens. Real closure is quieter. It's waking up one morning and realizing you haven't thought about him in weeks. It's hearing his name in passing and feeling nothing. It's looking at your own reflection and seeing only yourself, No shadows clinging to your outline. No chains dragging behind you. It's life. Messy, beautiful, brutal life. Moving forward without asking your permission. And me? I was moving forward. Fast. After Rick Dalton died, the world didn't stop spinning. No one threw a parade. No angels descended from the heavens to hand me a gold medal for surviving him. The sun rose. The bills came in the mail. My kids had soccer practice and dentist appointments and science fairs that smelled like burnt glue and cheap crayons. Life kept happening. And that, I realized, was the victory. Not standing over his grave. Not screaming at the sky about all the things he owed me. The real victory was living so fully, so loudly, so unapologetically that his absence became irrelevant. I had my family. I had my home. I had built a life out of nothing but splinters and rage and stubborn, bleeding hope. And it was mine. Every imperfect, glorious inch of it. Sometimes, when the house was quiet, when the kids were asleep, when my wife curled into my side, and the only sound was the hum of the fridge, I let myself think about him. Not the man he wanted the world to see. Not the man who looked away when I needed him most. The real Rick Dalton. The scared, selfish boy in a grown man's body who thought running from responsibility made him powerful. The coward who chose pride over love. I didn't pity him. I didn't hate him. I didn't need him anymore. He was a lesson, carved deep into my bones. A warning. A map of all the places I would never go. All the mistakes I would never make. He made me in ways he never understood. And in the end, he gave me the greatest gift he was capable of offering. He taught me exactly who I didn't want to be. I taught my kids different lessons. That love isn't a currency you trade for good behavior. That family is chosen every day, not just at birth. That real strength is showing up when it's hard, staying when it's ugly, loving even when it hurts. And every time my son runs into my arms after a scraped knee, every time my daughter calls me Dad, like it's the safest word in the world, I know. I know I broke the cycle. I know I built something better. I know I won. Not in the petty way Rick would have understood. Not with revenge or spite or flashy victories. No, I won because I lived. Because I loved. Because I refused to become him. One night, standing alone on the porch with a beer in my hand, and the stars spread out like shattered diamonds overhead, I whispered 2 words into the night. Thank you. Not to him. Not to the man who abandoned me. But to the pain. To the hunger. To the brutal, unforgiving fire that forged me into something stronger than he could ever comprehend. Thank you for breaking me. Thank you for leaving me. Thank you for teaching me that I never needed you to be whole. And then I went back inside, closed the door, and never looked back again.